So please take a note of this page and of the next page as well. Very, very important. It describes what a risk-based approach is for risk assessment. So what this is trying to say, pardon me, is that the risk-based approach considers much more than complying to regulation. That means you're not doing lip service. It also gives the perception of a company that is credible, it's reliable, it's accountable, they're responsible. They're not just they're not on their compliance journey just for the sake of it. They are really doing it to really secure, to reduce costs, to protect personal data, responsible essentially. Okay, so the implementation of these requirements, they do it in actuality, and then compliance is consequential. So for them, it's not to do it because the inspectors are coming. We're doing it because we want to protect, we want to respect, and we want to be responsible. Okay, so that is what a risk-based approach is. And evidence of risk-based approach. Bear me 1 second, I'll put notepad on here. An example evidence of a risk-based or of a credible company. Evidence of a credible company on a GDPR journey in actuality. Yes, please. Is one who possibly has sorry, 1 second. Who possibly has implemented my spellings ISO 27001, because ISO has a subdomain 18.1.4. So that means we have, instead of focusing on GDPR, we are doing ISO, and then we'll now look at GDPR. We are looking at something much more, but then we are taking GDPR as well. So if you go back to the statement, the risk-based approach considers not just compliance, but also what a reliable and accountable organization wants to accomplish. And as such, privacy requirements are done in actuality to demonstrate compliance. Okay, we're not just doing it because we want to be compliant, we're doing much more. Okay, so if you look at ISO clause 18.1.4, there is protection of personally identifiable information. But if we're doing much more along all the other domains and privacy comes into it, it means we are doing it not just for lip service, but because we care about our data subjects. Okay. Okay. So the GDPR says, depending on specific requirements and in context, controllers have to conduct a risk assessment, even though it does not clearly say within the articles that a risk assessment has to be done. It does not define it in the articles, but it explains it in the recital. Okay, so within the articles, it doesn't make mention or define risk assessment, but it says appropriate security controls must be taken at Article 32. Okay, so you see the second bullet point, the risk assessment is a starting point for categorizing risky activities. We all know about the data protection impact assessment, or as it's also called, a privacy impact assessment. But before you go to do that, which is essentially a risk assessment, you do a risk assessment before you focus on personal data. Risk assessment is more global. It covers much more of the enterprise, while data protection impact assessment focuses on the processing of personal data. I'll check if there are questions so far. Oh no, Dare, sorry. You would not use factors that are not changing. Within risk management, there's an element of monitoring and reviewing. It's basically agreeing. So you could review it after 12 months as an example, but the whole business would agree to it. So it's not, you don't use constants, you use variables that are agreed, because threats change. So you can't also, if threats change, we put controls in place to either reduce likelihood or to reduce impact, since those are the two factors. So we put, if the likelihood of people logging into this portal without paying for the course is high, we would now put some kind of control, making sure there is 2 steps before they log in. Does not mean it's a constant. It's basically saying we've agreed to what is likely and what is the impact. Okay, so please take a note of this page as well, because it gives examples of risky activities. When we process sensitive personal data, such as children's data, it is risky. Yeah, they need better protection than, say, other kinds of personal data. Yeah, so when you process children's data, it is a risky activity. You would consider it in your risk assessment. When you process a lot of data, the volume is quite vast and it can affect a whole number of people. Just think Facebook, think Yahoo. That is regarded as risky processing. If we were only processing uh, the personal data of 10 individuals, it won't be as big an impact if we lose their data compared to losing millions of data subjects' personal data. Okay? The processing of data in a different way, or processing data after you've done your impact assessment and that impact assessment validity has expired. You are now in a gray area. Yeah, that situation is a risk, and it's a risky situation. Okay, of course, profiling, when you process various categories of data, criminal conviction, sensitive personal data, and of course the use of new technologies. These are specifically listed in the regulation to do a DPIA. And of course, it says this is not an exhaustive list, but take a note of it, because in the exam you will only have 3 hours, and as it's open book, there's nothing wrong in using exactly the same list of risk activities or scenarios. So we've looked at activities that can result in harm, and these are activities that can result in threats. Differentiate the 2 pages, but mark them. These ones can result in harm. Here, it hasn't been expressed to result in harm because there's no harm element. They are regarded as threats. Okay? As it hasn't been expressed to include harm, it simply says when you process unjustifiable data collection, that's a threat. It can lead to harm, but at the moment as it's expressed, it's a threat. When you use incorrect data, it's a threat. It is potential, because the definition of a threat is the potential cause of harm. So it's a potential. Even if it's been, even if it materializes, by definition, it's a potential. Okay. So this page for threats. Okay. The guidelines for risk assessment. It says you have to do a context establishment because it says the process for identifying risk has to come by the assessment of their origin, their nature, likelihood, severity, and then of course treating it to by with best practices. Yeah, this can include codes of conduct, certifications, guidelines, policies, and of course the technical measures as well. Okay. This is taken from recital 77. So the first thing you would need to do is to decide what risk analysis approach you would take. And the risk analysis can be qualitative, a hybrid of both qualitative and quantitative, or simply a quantitative one. It can even be a combination of all three, step by step. You can start with a qualitative, move on to a quantitative, and do a semi-quantitative. Okay. So, because risk is calculated as likelihood multiplied by impact, on one axis you would have likelihood, and on another you would have impact. But because on this page now we're looking at qualitative risk assessment, they are classed as low, medium, high. That's how you signify a qualitative assessment. Okay. And the 1, 2, 3 you see in the boxes are simply to count the number of risk assessment. So it's the words within. Anything in box 9 for explanation, we would say is unacceptable because the likelihood is quite high and the impact, sorry, this is what's happening. On the likelihood axis, you shouldn't have low, medium, high. You should have unlikely, might, and expected. And on the impact axis, you should have low, medium, high. So it flips. Yeah. So what we're saying is for 9, rectangle 9, the likelihood is expected and the impact is high. So we can set our threshold for that box to say it's unacceptable. So anybody doing a risk assessment, once they pick the right scores and they land in 9, would know the business would not accept any risk that is critical. And they've defined what is critical. Okay. And a quantitative risk assessment uses numerical values instead of descriptive scales, the low, medium, high. But as you can see, each one, there is not a true quantitative or qualitative. They rely on each other because you would have to explain what is 8, what is 10 on each of the quadrants or each of the boxes rather. Yeah. And to do quantitative data or quantitative risk assessment, you actually need to know or measure as close as possible, give a good score of what is low, what is medium, and what is high. Otherwise, you get a calculation and it messes up the controls you set later on because you might be scoring a particular risk too high or scoring a risk too low, a risk scenario too low. So it demands very good or close to accurate numerical values for each of the elements. Yep. So these are the differences between not advantages and disadvantages, but rather the differences between the two. Qualitative is regarded as subjective data, and quantitative is regarded as objective data. Do not confuse this label with what we said about the risk assessment being objective. Within the risk assessment, you also have quantitative and qualitative, and each one have a label. Quantitative being regarded as objective because you give them numbers, or qualitative is regarded as subjective because you describe the risk scenario, and it's based on what somebody thinks is high risk, medium risk, and low risk. So it's based on the perception of stakeholders. And that's why when you do stakeholder engagement, you go to departments. One department will say, oh, this server is critical, or this situation, if we allow people in, is not acceptable. And if you take that same description to HR, they would give it a different score. And that's why qualitative is based on risk perceptions, while giving numerical values to risk elements is based on the ability of experts to estimate risk in financial terms. Yep. Note that I haven't said to mark any page so far after the ones we did.
Hi, Roy.
Sorry, yep.
Oludare. Sorry, in your previous slide, just the last slide, can we look at any risk, any risks practically that could fall under
this one?
No, the one you just left.
This one.
Qualitative and the qualitative and quantitative.
The quantitative here, the numbers were given arbitrarily, so we cannot use this particular slide.
But no, not this page. Not this page, okay. Sorry. The one.
This one.
No, the one that has qualitative and quantitative.
This one.
Yes, this one. Yes. Can we look at any practical risk types that fall under? I mean, like maybe can you take a scenario and just probably flesh it out based on this, so that we know, okay, if this type of risk comes up, or maybe we use quantitative on this type of risk.
Yeah.
To differentiate it for more clarity.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll try and see. Okay, in the medical, say in the medical field, yeah. If we always work with patient data, so they come into the door, they go to reception, we book them on an appointment and things like that, and then they keep us responsible for their personal data. Now, you might want to say, right, if the person at the front door does not treat that in confidence and it goes out, say we're a private hospital, even we're not public, and it is lost, their personal data is revealed to who it shouldn't be revealed to, what is the impact of losing one patient's data? You might give it a low, because it will not threaten our operation that much. It might be a nuisance. They might complain to management. The front desk person might get a reprimand. So you give it that kind of score, and that is qualitative. That is one risk scenario. Okay, they reveal it, they didn't protect it, they put it under their desk. Yeah, so you describe that whole scenario. So if it's lost, you can also do the same for impact. I mean, for integrity. So we've done it for confidentiality. You can do the same thing for integrity. So what if they put the wrong address? And when we want to send out things to those patients, or that patient, since we're using just one, we send it to the wrong address so they don't get it. Now, you would have to agree what it will be, because even one patient might not get their medication or their call for critical treatment. So integrity in that case will be higher than confidentiality, but you have to agree based on your context. And since we're using a private hospital, they might call that scenario high. Another private hospital might call it low. For them, losing one patient, even if they die, is not high. That's why you need to agree to that. Meanwhile, you can also give a score to say the fact that it will be one patient. What if they take us to court? What would we be fined? What would the regulators fine us or tell us to pay for losing that one patient data. So you can now express it in monetary term. Any impact, any risk from losing patient data might cause us, I don't know, £100 to 10,000. So you put that scale as low when you want to combine both quantitative and qualitative. Or you could say anything within that goes more than 10,000, that is high and is unacceptable. So those are the uses of qualitative and quantitative. And the reason why it says quantitative is based on the ability of experts. You say, so we lose one patient's data. What is that to us in monetary terms? Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. That was a very good question. So I know from the questions people are asking, those who are doing CDPO in actuality, following a risk-based approach. Okay, so in doing your risk assessment, the criteria you should consider are these: that it is compatible with what is required by the GDPR. We saw that in recital 77. That means it is objective. You have you do identification of risk. You identify the processing activities. You identify likelihood. You identify impact before you calculate risk. When point number 3 that says existence of software tools is because automation gives the perception of maturity. If you are all manual, the maturity is quite low because there can be errors and things like that. But for any establishment that has automation, the maturity is high, and that's why it says if there are existence of tools. Meanwhile, these tools can be a simple Excel sheet that has been automated or that runs a macro, a simple software program. That is also regarded as good. Okay. And then, of course, if you have manual, people are trained to use it. It's been used by some other people in the industry. So you've not just selected that method for no reason. You've actually gone through a selection criteria. That's number 7. So this is the risk assessment step or picture. And as we said, risk assessment, the first step in doing risk assessment is risk identification. So this methodology that you can see on this screen is compatible with the GDPR because it follows identification of risk, analysis of risk, and prioritization. What the article says is you select appropriate security measures. By going through this process and we get to evaluation, you would see that the controls or measure we select will be appropriate to the risk and would have considered our context. That is what kind of processing activities we do. And that is what is required by the standard, by the regulation, sorry. Okay, so first step in risk assessment is risk identification. And that's why we've colored that column in red. Identify risk. How do we identify risk? We go via an asset-based approach. So this methodology is showing us risk identification in an asset-based approach. We have to identify our assets first. Is there anybody who wants to talk me through either this methodology you see on the board or the one you are used to? I'll take two colors.
Right, I didn't understand the question. Can you repeat it again, please?
Very good. I want someone to talk us through this methodology of risk assessment following an asset-based approach or another methodology that they are used to, if not this one that is on the board, and then we'll see if we can align it. Hello?
No, I don't have a.
Yes, okay. Adore, we have an index. Adore, there's an index on the slides that I sent you.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that. I'll
No
check
problem.
it.
All right then. Oludare, that is fine. We will take that. Even though it's strictly technical, what I wanted us to talk about was a risk assessment that will lead us to select both technical and organizational measures. So if your risk assessment for your server infrastructure would also include controls that are not strictly technical, then go for it.
Roy, so from this risk assessment, I guess it's important for us to complete the inventory, right? So that we can identify our assets and better understand where we have gaps, or would you be starting somewhere else? I'm just following it from.
That's a good place to start. What it's saying is identify all your assets. When you identify all of them, which one of them do we process personal data with? You understand?
Right.
So if you say
Yeah.
we store personal data here, we transfer personal data there, we use mobile devices to call, you identify all your assets that are within scope, because that's what we saw in the, maybe 1 second, I'll take you backwards. It says it should look at the scope, the nature, likelihood, and severity. And that's why this methodology is why we've introduced that. And that's why we said, first of all, identify the assets. You don't want to spend time looking at irrelevant areas of the business. You want to identify those assets that are within scope, that either do any form of processing as we define processing. So very good place to start. Thanks, Ador. Do you want to continue?
Yeah, so normally what I have done is ensure that the inventory is completed. Once it's completed, the areas that I'll identify as high risk areas would be places where there's a high volume of personal information or a lot of transfers or processing of data. So either third parties, third countries, or just a large volume. So, I mean, that was a great shout about quantitative data, because that's one of the flags wherever we have the most.
Absolutely.
And the most sensitive in terms of PI. Yeah, so I'll do that and consider those the highest risk areas, the areas with the largest amount of threat.
Very good.
Yeah, and that would be where we'd be looking at where to focus on for remediation. Those would be the controls we now start putting in place. What are the firewalls like? What are the operational measures like? Administrative measures or whatever else that we feel would mitigate the risk. Yeah.
Yep, that is very, very good. So you select both administrative and technical controls then.
Correct.
Absolutely. Well done. Okay, that's a very, very good one. Okay, so to complete what Adore has started, as I was explaining, you identify your assets everywhere you process personal data. Personally, I don't do identification of threats. I do identification of vulnerabilities after identifying the assets. So now we have this list of assets. We have the inventory. And if you don't have an inventory, you create it, but you identify all your assets. Then you pick one asset and you say, what is the vulnerability? It will be based on its attributes. It has a password that is not strong. We have unpatched vulnerabilities, or no maintenance, no support, basically attributes of the assets. Because by describing the attributes, you would now know what kind of threats would exploit those vulnerabilities. You now know the nature of the asset, and you are now thinking, now what can go wrong based on what we know about this asset? Is it kept at reception? By its location, what threat can happen to it? So we need to move it somewhere else. So you describe its vulnerability, and by describing those vulnerabilities, you now know what threats can happen to it. But the identification of existing controls is one of the most important steps. You remember when we started this course, I said strategic alignment. The success of your GDPR program depends on how much it aligns to the strategy of the business. And in identifying existing controls, that is one evidence that your program aligns. You don't want them to waste money because they might have controls already in place. You will not be suggesting that they buy new controls. Let's see what we have in-house at the moment. Can we reconfigure? Can we retrain? Can we reassign? Can we allocate what we have? As an example, Dario was going to give us a risk assessment about the firewall. Was it firewall? Technical server infrastructure. Okay, let me just use a firewall as an example. Why should we buy a Cisco firewall? You can't just come and say, oh, because people are connecting from that country where we don't want them to connect and they can take personal data, let's buy a Cisco firewall. That is not thinking for the business. But when you say, oh, we want to stop people connecting from these countries, so you know what we'll do? Let's see what controls we have in place. We have firewalls. Can we reconfigure those firewalls to block that access or those accesses from those countries? You do that, you're saving pounds and dollars for the business. They are more likely to support you if you think like that than when you skip identifying existing controls and simply just say, let's buy firewalls. Okay, so you look at what you have in-house already and see if they can handle those threats that you've now identified. Okay, so it's step by step. And after identifying the existing controls, you will say, now, if we don't have those controls, what's the likelihood of that threat happening? Yeah, so that's the journey. And if you identify the likelihood, you now say, right, if it does happen, what's the impact? So that column would have identified likelihood and impact, and we take it to assess in the risk analysis step. So what we are saying in this picture is that risk assessment consists of risk identification, risk analysis, and risk evaluation. That is what is risk assessment. We are not managing risk, we are simply assessing it. So to assess it, we need to know it by identifying it. We now do the calculation. So the risk analysis step is where we do the L multiplied by I and then determine the level of the risk. Okay, now by determining the level of the risk, we'll have so many scores per asset because we will take each asset to do this assessment. And when you do the R equals to L multiplied by I, you do that for every asset, every singular risk per asset. And then you will get so many scores. I'll give you an example. Here. So do R equals to L multiplied by I for firewall. We do the same for mobile phone. Then you do the same for customer database. So if we have said we'll give scores for the L multiplied by I, whether quantitatively or qualitatively, we'll have different scores. So this can maybe would be 20, 22 I've given by mistake. And we could have a score for this one to be 30, because the numbers might be different. And then for this one, 45. It means this will be our priority because the score is high. The next high score is 30. So we'll treat this second. And then of course, we'll treat this third. Okay? So the L multiplied by I happens in the analysis stage. And then we'll take the result of that to the evaluation. and the result is what we mean by the 22, 30, 45, and then set the prioritization on them. Are we clear? Okay. Yeah. So in doing risk identification, you would need to consider the sources of risk, the actions, and the impact that they can have. So their causes and their potential consequences. Yeah. And of course, this is to generate a list of risks, different risk scenarios that would stop you from achieving your objective or that would have an impact on the business one way or the other. Okay? And then identification of assets. I've already described it, but you can, as you can see, it says it should be within the scope and boundaries for which the risk assessment is to be conducted. In our case, it is the enterprise. Okay? If we're doing it for Tesco UK, then it's Tesco UK's assets we're considering. Okay? And eventually what you get is a list of assets that you would need to manage in terms of risk and also the processes, because each asset we're considering would have process. If you remember the document I showed you yesterday, we looked at process universe. Okay, so we know that say a company has products and services. What is in scope would be those products and services that handle personal data. Those are the things that will be in scope. Any other area where they don't have personal data, there are some B2Bs that will be in scope, but there are so many that will not be in scope. So we see a lot of B2Bs. B2B data will not be in scope. So now we know products and services. What are the processes that deliver those products and services in scope? Processes. Yep. We might find HR, because always doing that. Do we sell to customers? So sales might come in. Marketing might also be there. Yeah, these are the processes, the business areas that process personal data. And because they are the places we are considering, we'll look at their infrastructure. Yeah, that means their assets. Structure. Yeah. And in looking at their infrastructure, we're looking at hardware, software. What else? The people, the actors, those people that do the processing. Because we want to know what vulnerabilities they have. Are they trained? Are they supervised? Have they signed NDAs? Yeah. So people, what else? The sites, the buildings. Yeah. And the security around the buildings, the sites. What else? I need help.
Can we think of political?
No, we're looking at their. So what I'm saying is, we are considering assets. We're trying to flesh out assets within process universe that are within. So any asset that processes personal data. So we start from products and services of the business. We now know those areas where personal data is happening. And we say HR, sales, and marketing. That means we'll only look at what is in scope in HR, sales, and marketing in terms of hardware, software, the people, the sites, the network. What kind of network do they have? You remember we said we want to see if the network is vulnerable. Do they have single points of failure and things like that? If it's redundant, okay? So applications will come under software. So let's just stop like this, but there can be more than this. I know there are, okay? So you create a list. And in terms of hardware, you can say we have, what do they used to call those servers now? You could say Oracle server or Oracle database. Software, you can say operating systems, Windows, Linux, and on like that. So you can name the assets Because what you want to do is to know their particular vulnerabilities. That way you would know the exact threats. So if we have open source software as an example, one of the vulnerabilities would be a lack of support or timely support because it's open source. Yep. Yeah, aha. Here we have the list of supporting assets. This is what I was looking for. So as you can see, products and services assets. So please mark this page. Makes it easy for me and hopefully for you as well. Okay, so you go from products and services. Those are the primary assets, just like we did here. We ruled out many others. Only those things that are here will be our primary assets, which is what it's saying here. Those will be our primary assets concerned with processing personal data. So around business process and that affect the product and service. Any other department and their assets would be supporting assets because they might interact with personal data. Yeah, so one thing I didn't get was the organizational structure. Okay, so please mark this page. This is how you identify assets. Any question for me?
Quick one, Roy. How is the organizational structure an asset? I mean, I can see how it would benefit, but how is it an asset?
Very good. The reason why we're talking about organizational structure and whether it's vulnerable or as it's an asset is they have a DPO. One, that's one of the things you identify. He is independent. Yeah. No conflict of interest. Otherwise, there can be a threat. So we are looking at the organizational structure and seeing where it can be exploited. If they don't have a DPO, a threat can happen. They might not be compliant. It's one of the threats. They might not get advice. Things like they might even fall foul of the regulation because they process sensitive personal data on a large scale. They do monitoring. Yeah. So that's what we say organizational structure. If he's not independent, he's reporting to IT. That means he doesn't take his own initiative, just like as an example. And also one other thing, lines of reporting. How many people are involved in data protection? Is it just one person or do they have a number of people? And even those people that do the actual processing, have they been given the tools? Are they empowered? Are they enabled? Have the resources they need? Do they have the things to pseudonymize? And do they know how to do it? Do they know how to encrypt? And do they know when to encrypt? So that's why you also look at the organizational structure as an asset. Is that okay, Ado?
Fantastic. Thank you.
No problem.
Hi, Roy.
Hiya.
Yeah, I think Oludare. I think I got an example. I was talking with someone recently, and the person was saying that the DPO in the organization wasn't being given a free hand.
Sorry, the DPO wasn't given
a free hand to, I mean, like, suggest things. The project manager would not. The project manager would override what the DPO was saying. So I was telling the person that it will call to question their compliance level, because I think the DPO should be independent and should be the advice that should be overriding impacts.
Absolutely. That's why the regulation says they should report to the highest level within the business. And even when they report to the highest level, the work that they carry out must be on their own initiative. It must not be given, today do DPI. No, what they do in the business should be of their own initiative, and they should report to the highest level of the business. Okay, there's a very interesting question from John Ella. He said the discussion we're having so far is InfoSec heavy, and whether you need to build up significant knowledge in InfoSec. You don't need to build significant knowledge in InfoSec. When we started on day one, we said you need basic knowledge of information security, knowing confidentiality, integrity, availability, knowing what is vulnerability, what is threats and risk, basic knowledge. Besides, DPOs have different SMEs. You have lawyer SME DPOs. You have InfoSec DPOs. And you have so many other DPOs. My observation in the market is if you have ISMS or information security knowledge and you have DPO knowledge, it is well regarded for the simple fact that they are depending on people who are experienced in InfoSec to help deliver the requirements of data protection. Just like they are relying on lawyers to help interpret the legal aspects of the DPA, of the GDPR, sorry, I'm going back to DPA. Yeah, so you don't need to be InfoSec heavy, but if you sat down in a room where they are interviewing the position of DPO and you express this background noise coming from somewhere, and you express yourself with adequate knowledge in InfoSec, you would differentiate yourself from one who doesn't have so much knowledge simply because of the risk assessment part. But there are so many parts to the GDPR. Okay. Yeah, and what is happening here now is I am shining because this is my food as a risk manager. Doesn't mean I know every part the same, but risk is my food. Okay, John? Thank you. Okay. And so you can now.
Sorry, Roy, quick one.
Yes, 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 yes.
There's different schools of thought with this one. I've seen the benefit of InfoSec within carrying out compliance programs.
Yeah.
But a lot of legal schools of thought, or whether it's the authorizing bodies themselves, seem to be of the opinion that you do not have to be InfoSec certified. I don't know how you feel about it because obviously you're stressing both sides. I think one is an enabler.
No, that's exactly my thought. That's what I said. I simply said, if you have it, it'll be beneficial.
Yeah.
Do it. And I'll show you why I say so. Yeah, that's why I'm opening on. Nothing stops you from doing it. It's simply saying if I sat down together with someone else in this area, that's why I said we are in an area where it's my food. Doesn't mean other areas somebody else would not shine. You understand
I'm
what I'm saying?
looking at it that don't you feel from your experience, it forms almost the platform for GDPR.
Oh, the platform, to be quite honest with you, I have sat down with a number of people. It has a lot to do with InfoSec. And simply ISMS, we have who are the people that have been doing data protection? Lawyers have been taking people to court to help them with their rights. Data information security people have been helping people to secure or to protect that personal data in terms of the technical and organizational. I produced a spreadsheet some time ago. I think it was for the ISO course, and it showed technical and non-technical measures from ISMS, a whole 114. I'll see if I can show it here. Give me 1 second, but let's take it step by step. First, I'll show you what it says you need to have for this. And then I'll show you those controls. Did I just go past it? Okay, I'll flesh that out, but let me show you the controls first of all. Aha. So it has 114 controls, of course, from the code of practice, the control objectives and control, and it tells you the objective of the control. Now, I'm saying because ISMS, ISO 27001, asks you to know these controls that are both technical and non-technical, as you can see, physical controls, administrative, technical, and managerial. All other, these three classes of controls are non-technical, of course, and only one is technical. And if you go down to um, Annex 18.1.4, privacy and protection of personal identifiable information, that's what we said recently, just now, about um, an organization that is pursuing compliance. In actuality, they would have done something much more. You do a whole lot more than just compliance. Compliance being one of the many things you do, and then you get compliant. As an example, an organization for who GDPR applies will not get certified ISO until they have got certified or they have attained an attestation of compliance of GDPR. So GDPR is just one small part, or protection of personal data is one small part of the InfoSec world. Yeah? So that's what I'm trying to say. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right then. There's a question here. I think in these days, with cloud-based technology and social media, it will be good to have some fair knowledge of technical infrastructure as DPO. The more the merrier. I am always one to encourage education. There's the difference between need and want. What you need is different from what you should have. Yeah. If you are technical, make sure you express yourself in your strengths. Yeah. As they always advise you. Yeah. So what you need, you don't need in-depth technical knowledge, but if you do have it, you could be leaning, you could lean on that and show yourself on that as well. Hopefully I'll be able to show the requirements. I think it's on day 4 actually. Bear 1 second. I just want to show what should you require. We'll catch up, don't worry. In case anyone is wondering, where did I put this just now? Yeah. Yes. So your professional experience for this course, what it says you should have. Can somebody check their index and tell me what page for the position, designation, and task of a DPO? I think that's where we'll find it. If anybody has access to their index.
They on the same day too. Or
Sorry?
which day slides? Are we still looking at the day two?
No, just look at the index, your index. You know, you have an index.
Oh, okay.
So I just want to the index it to show you it should where we talk about the DPO. What page is it?
Page 35.
Okay, page 35 of day 1.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
No, I think that should be in day 2. I think.
Is it?
Yeah. It's
Okay.
it's in day 235 when you talk about the data protection
Page
officer.
what? Page 2, page 35, yeah?
Yeah, on day 2, page 35.
Yeah, Harry is correct.
Sorry?
Yes, Harry is right.
Okay, I'll open another instance of day 2 so that I don't mess up the one we have open. So I guess you guys are ahead of me already. You can see what it says there. So page 35. Sorry, my PC is quite slow tonight. It's downloading every click I give it, it downloads. Oh man. Okay. No, it's not there. Okay, let's go ahead. I'll look for it and I'll show you Ado so that this doesn't take up all our time. Yeah? Aha. Here. Finally. Just when I was about to give up. So the professional qualifications of a DPO and also understanding of IT and data security would be helpful. Knowledge of the business sector, what industry it's in. And we use when we started, we said what kind of tools we can use to understand any business. And that's why our methodology started with understanding the business and we talked about the external environment and the internal environment, because these are what are useful and helpful for a DPO. And then ability to promote a culture of data protection. And I think I even asked you to mark that particular one, if you remember. So these are the things that a DPO needs to understand. It doesn't say expertise in IT, it says understanding of it. Okay? All right. I'm taking your silence as consent to go on.
Are you recording the consent?
Can we opt out? You already have legitimate purpose.
Okay, well done. Okay, so I've described what identification of existing controls are. In some frameworks, they call this step control gap analysis, where you're looking to see whether you have existing controls that can handle the threats that have just been identified. And the different ways to identify these controls, you can use documents. You can check physically whether those controls exist. You can interview different layers and different stakeholders, asking them the questions. Okay, as you can see, it says 2 layers. Interview the people that do the processing and those that supervise them as well. And we said why it's important to get consensus when you do interview. I've adopted this style that when I'm trying to figure out what is happening, maybe in an audit or a gap analysis, I look to interview 2 people, because the operator might say this is what we do, and the manager might say this is what they're supposed to do. Okay, so it's good practice to always interview 2 layers in a business. If you are interviewing middle management, you could also interview top management. If you are interviewing operators, also interview their supervisors or managers. Okay, so these are all the ways to check out and figure out what existing controls they have. So we have documentation, we have interview, we have physical checks. You can also do technical checks. Yeah, technical operations. Yeah, just like I told you, I do vulnerabilities after identifying assets, but in this description here, this is a step where they identify vulnerabilities, and the vulnerabilities can exist in different places, just like I showed you on the notepad. Okay, the vulnerabilities will be throughout all the assets you identified: the organizational structure, the people, processes and procedures, the physical environment, the hardware, software, okay, and even your dependence on external parties. What if we have only one supplier and they go out of business or they cannot supply? So you look at vulnerabilities around all these areas. And just like we marked the threat pages, please mark the vulnerability pages, or the vulnerability page rather. Okay. Right. And then you identify the impacts. Yeah. So we're going through that flow. All of these things we're doing is an asset-based approach to risk identification. That red column we showed. We're going through the whole journey because eventually what we're trying to identify is L and I. But we cannot know L and I unless we go through the journey from assets, vulnerability, threats, existing controls, and then we will not be able to say what's the likelihood of the threat and what's the potential size of the impact if it does happen. So all of this is simply to get our L and I and be able to calculate risk, because it's risk identification. Okay, and what we get from here fits into the next column of risk analysis. It's analysis, because this is where we will do the calculation. We've simply just identified all the elements, and then the R equals to L multiplied by I is actually done in this column. Yep, and the results we get from here will feed into the next column. So in identifying consequences, you start by identifying the different scenarios. We do mobile banking, we transfer with USBs, we use UPS, we use DHL, and then all the consequences of the kinds of you look at the different risk scenarios. Yeah, you would have determined the threats and vulnerabilities. So we would have gone through all the journey before you can determine impact. Yep. You would list the affected resources and the kinds of data you use as well, whether sensitive or just personal data, and then you can determine the impact on the business. Okay. So impact can be direct and it can be indirect. Of course, direct impact are the things that happen as soon as the threat happens. So as soon as the threat happens, that initial consequence is direct impact. Anything further, like cost of lost opportunities, these are indirect impacts. So please mark this page as well. Okay, and then we want to assess the likelihood. We should have done control gap analysis, the identification of existing controls, and then if we don't have it, what's the likelihood of the threat happening? Okay, so after the incident scenarios have been described, you would now look to see what the likelihood is, how many times it will happen. And for those that are technical, if we have any pen testers in the house, the factors that determine likelihood of an incident is MOM. M-O-M. The means for it to happen. There is the opportunity, and of course the motivation. So these three factors say how likely it is for a threat to occur. That, as an example, the attackers have the means to do it. The internet is there. There's the opportunity. The door is open. The network is not segregated. And of course, there's the motivation, the value of the asset. So MOM would determine all these three factors, as you can see: motivation, capabilities, and of course, opportunity, the available resources. Okay, so that's how you determine likelihood of something happening. That's why I'll ask you to, this is the definition of likelihood, the chance of something happening. So once we've done that, the next step, we've done all the R equals to L multiplied by I. The next step now is to determine the level of risk. Okay, so a list of risk will have values assigned. We have already done that here. We have assigned values to all the risks. So all the risk scenarios that we've identified, you would have to give them a score. And that's what you're doing here. Okay, so all the list of risks would have values assigned to them. Okay, done that. The next step is to prioritize. Now that we've assigned it, we'll prioritize and say which one is number one, which one will be treated one, second, and third, which we did in this example as well. Okay, so that's what happens in risk evaluation. The key activity in risk evaluation is prioritization. I repeat, the key activity in risk evaluation is prioritization. Okay, I evaluated it based on predefined criteria. We know which is high, which is, that's why it says here, the second bullet point, which risks will be given priority. And the first bullet point even says risk evaluation involves comparing your levels of risk against a criteria that has been set and then prioritizing them. Okay, so that's the key thing here. You want to now know how to treat and when to treat in order. Okay, very, very good picture. This. The who wants to explain why the right top quadrant is priority one, why this is two, and why this is three, and why this is four. Can someone explain it for us, please?
Hi, Roy, it's Olive.
Hi, Olive. I didn't know you were in today, or you've been quiet.
I've been in. Yes.
Okay, well done.
So, private. Privacy one is the impact of the risk is high. The
Yes.
likelihood of it occurring also is high. So the L times I
Yes.
for priority one is the highest.
Very good.
That's why it's priority one, and then the rest follow like that as well.
Very, very good.
Okay. Thank you.
That's a very good one. Yes. So the reason why priority one is so named is because the likelihood of it happening, just like the same in project management, the proximity of the risk is quite close. It can happen anytime. The likelihood is high, is expected. Meanwhile, the impact is also high. So we'll give it a priority one. Yeah. And priority two, the impact is high, even though the likelihood is low. Any examples of risks that we can give priority two, where they have high impact but likelihood low?
I think one that comes to mind is, let's say, repositories on cloud platforms. The impact would be extremely high, but the likelihood is quite low because normally you're dealing with giants.
Very good. And the controls are good typically. Good. What about the chance of snow in Nigeria? The likelihood is close to zero, but if it did happen, it's quite high. The chance of an earthquake in London, earthquake.
Ram, I'm just laughing. I'm just laughing. Anything can happen in Nigeria. They can postpone Christmas even.
Oh, don't be a lazy youth.
Sorry, guys. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So, high impact, low likelihood. Yeah, is priority two because when it does happen, the impact is high, even though the likelihood is low. And priority three, they always happen. The likelihood is high, but you could also class some things there as nuisance because the impact is low, but they happen so frequently. So we'll attend to it. Meanwhile, things that are low likelihood, low impact, we don't have to at the moment, although we can monitor it because risk is dynamic and can change. So for there, you can monitor. Okay. I'm just going to, so we've come to the exercise bit. And so I'm going to check if anybody has any question for me. Oh, yes. Larry has a very good one there. I hope you can all see it. The likelihood that a snake will swallow cash is high, and the impact is high. 36 million is high. Okay, Dari, I think you were the one that asked a question about a practical example of qualitative and quantitative.
Yes.
When we table, yeah.
Yes, please.
All right. I have one of my sheets here in front of me. I've been looking for it. So in this sheet, we have impact from low to critical. We have, in fact, I'll type it because it's here with me and I can't share it. We have low, we have moderate, we have high, significant, and critical. Now, the business has to communicate this to everyone so that they understand what each one means. Because what is high, what is significant? Yeah, the definition we have is along the lines of impact on, give me 1 second, where it has impact on people, impact on operations, impact on regulation or regulatory impact. Regulatory impact on reputation. So all of this score that we said, low, medium, we'll score it on people, we'll score it on operations, we'll score it along regulatory, and what else can we score it on? Financial, the impact it will have on our financials. Yeah. So what we've said is, for as an example, people, what will be low impact for people? Because I said in the medical profession, low impact could be insignificant illness, cold, and it's not monthly. Yeah, and it will affect them for less than 2 days. That is qualitative. Now, if you want to do quantitative, you say along that same line, you say something that will affect, say, 10,000 or no, depending on the size of the business, say 20 people, members of staff. It will have a financial impact, even if it's less than 2 days. Then put the 2 here. Okay, so it will have a financial impact. So for that, you won't call it low anymore. You can say for one that would affect 20 people, almost an epidemic, you will say that will be significant. And you will do the same thing for operations, regulatory, reputation, and financial. Yeah, so let's do for financial as an example, because we did a figure. Anything less than £20,000 would say is moderate, or even though you can start from low. And then what would be critical is anything that would be between, how do they do this now? Yeah, say 2 million and 10 million as an example. So that will be critical. Okay, and reputation, any risk that happens and would only go in the local newspaper. That is, for us, is moderate or high or low. And then that will go national, would say is critical. Okay, so that's how you use both qualitative and quantitative risk descriptions. Okay. All right. So now that we have the exercise sheets, I said we'll discuss it when we come to here. Since we are now in exercise 6, have we had a look at the exercises before this one? Anyone?
Yes, I looked at some of them.
Okay, which one did you find challenging? and you would like us to discuss?
I think the ones I saw was straightforward to list out things. Oh, hold on, please, sorry.
No problem. Because I want us to do some together. Yes, Dari, that's what I'm saying. That's what I want us to do, Dari. But I want to hear what we have done already. So let's take the first exercise. Okay.
Okay, Roy.
Yep.
Hi, Roy. I had mentioned earlier that I don't know, the pages look blank.
Which the PDFs?
Yes.
Have you got a Mac? Is it a Mac you've got?
No, I have Windows.
Windows.
I have a PC.
I think
Okay.
if Olive, what you should do first of all is to download it from Google Drive, and then you can put
Yes.
once you put in the password, then you should be able to see it. But if you put it while on Google Drive, it will tell
Yes.
you it will be blank. I gave you some message to say it has expired or something of that sort.
Yeah, something about expire. So I downloaded it, and that's what I'm trying to look for now. But it was still blank unless I hover over it.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, that's strange. It has never happened before. Okay, can we do it on the screen and then we'll look to resolve that later?
Okay, that's fine.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
The first exercise says to prepare a summary explaining the purpose of the regulation and the areas it is designed to contribute to and accomplish. So let me know your strategy for answering this, and then we'll look to do it together. So how would you go about answering this? Remember, the exam is open book, so the exercise can be open book as well.
Areas it says to contribute.
It says to explain the purpose. How do we know the purpose of the GDPR?
Would you then
From the introduction.
From
the regulation.
Of the
regulation.
Yeah.
Okay, do I have it? Okay, from the introduction. Tell me where to go. So that's your strategy. You go to the introduction, look at the purpose of the GDPR. Okay. In order to ensure consistent, yeah? So things like that.
Okay, yes, please.
Very good. Okay. Now let me show you a simple way to do it. To do that, I need to go to day 1. This is a faster way to do it. I'm not saying the way you did it is wrong, but this is much faster. Don't forget you will have only 3 hours on that day. There, slide 27 of mine. It has already fleshed it out. So all we require you to do is to explain this, because the question says prepare a summary. The summary should explain the purpose, and this is the purpose of the GDPR. So all you'll be doing is preparing a summary to explain this. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Roy, so are you saying that most of the answers we can get,
yes,
are from the slides?
I didn't say
exam, do we just...
No, you can't get some. You get all of it. Did you hear that? You will get all of it from there.
You get all of the answers from the slides?
You can get, yes, all of it.
Perfect.
Plus,
perfect.
Regulation itself. So you're allowed to come in with the regulation.
Yeah, it's just that if you're thinking about exam technique, is the regulation is just too cumbersome to try and get answers from that. So.
Oh yeah, I agree with you. But there's something I'll share with you over the weekend that would help you. Or should I even share it on? Let me share it here, so that you can print it yourselves. I'll show you something that can help you. Privacy and GDPR. If you go here, print this. It gives you the chapters, the articles, and the relevant recitals for each. So if you can do this and print it out, you can bring it into the exam as well. So just say save as PDF, and then of course print it out.
Perfect, thank you.
No problem.
Hi, Roy.
Yes. Is that
Please,
Felicia?
could you put the link? It's Olive.
Oh, sorry, Olive. Yeah, I can see you now. Okay. The link.
Please, could you put that link in the chat?
Okay. And if you're doing it online, you can click on the hyperlink. It will take you to the relevant article. And each article have the recitals that are relevant to them as well.
Hi, Roy.
Hiya.
Yeah, Oliver. Really, so it's good to know that we can really have access to this in the exams, because
yes,
I was using this link yesterday to do something, and even earlier today, and I found it very useful.
It is super. Yeah.
I was wondering, it categorizes everything under specific headings for you.
Yes.
So that if you're looking for anything, the online versions that we have are just generalistic, just listing the articles together, but this seems to categorize under headings.
Under chapters, articles, yeah, absolutely. Yes. As you can see, chapter 2, all the principles are there. So article 5 to 11 deals with principles, which is what we did from day 1 anyway. But this gives you the links. Thank you, Daria. I didn't know that's what they were asking, that I should type in the link there.
Yeah, I've already put it in the chat box.
Yeah, well done. Thank you.
It's okay, Roy. When you showed it, I was able to copy it as well.
All right. Okay. Okay. So that's that for question 1. Now, question 2. The GDPR contains 6 principles, and these principles relate to the processing of personal data. Now, besides being requirements, what is the importance of complying with the principles? So what we want to know is the importance of complying with the 6 principles. What will be your approach? This is what we should do. The 6 principles. I'm going to go away from what we've typed so far so that we separate what we're doing now. Yeah? Okay, so it's asking that besides being requirements, what is the importance of complying with these principles? The strategy is if we comply to, you can pick anyone to start with. If we comply with processing data lawfully, fairly, and transparently, we would not be going against the law. If we process on the principle of storage limitation, we will not be keeping any data beyond its useful life, and also we'll be avoiding paying a penalty and things like that. So that's the style, that's the way, that's the strategy in answering this question. Okay, if we process data and we respect the principle of integrity and confidentiality, it means we will not be disclosing to unauthorized individuals or parties data that should not be disclosed to them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. So that's the importance of complying with them. And you can also say so that there's no possibility of being fined 2% of global revenue and up to 4%. You didn't catch that?
We got it.
Okay. Now this one, very popular exam question. So please mark it. It says, according to the GDPR, businesses should respect and protect rights and freedoms of data subjects of a wide range. Now, what are the 2 things that an organization can do to protect or to ensure rather the right to be informed? What are the 2 measures? What are the 2 things that you would find in any business and would give you the confidence that they respect the right to be informed?
Privacy notice.
Contact details.
Contact details of the DPO, right?
Yes.
Yep. The answers we have. Yep.
You also have your privacy notice.
Your privacy notice. Yep. You use that to inform them. Very good. I think we have. It's very clear that we have DPOs in the house already. So you have your privacy notice. You publish the contact details of the DPO. Yeah, these are two examples. And since they say two, just limit yourself to two, but there can be so many more. Okay. So you provide the data subject with the contact details that's been published. You have a register of the purpose of processing, and you inform them. It means you're respecting that right to be informed. Okay. And what about the right to object? So that we'll do it quickly. You've communicated to the data subject their right to object at any time. So you give them the parameters and make it easy for them to object as well. Yeah, not when it comes to objecting, they now start scrambling to know what to do and where to do it. So you respect the right to object because you've communicated to them how to do that. You can also have a policy that clearly states that the data subject is to be enabled to object to processing of their personal data. That is data protection by design. We have a policy. We don't just do it, it's by design. So management have given us the directive to do that. Okay. And finally, this one. What will be your strategy in answering this?
There's a list of responsibilities.
Yep. Where?
DPO is
Article 39.
39.
37 is the designation, 38 is the position, and 39 is the tasks of the DPO. So you can just list it as is, and you'll get your full mark.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so you see 39, the tasks of the DPO. It says at least all of this. So that's all you need to put there. It's also in your slides. Yeah, but that's the reason why I said this link is very good. And if you print it out, you can bring it because you can only bring in papers. So if you just quickly search, where would I go to find anything about the DPO? Right here. And you see tasks of the DPO. And so you will just go to what you have in your hand, the regulation, because you can come in with the regulation as well. Everything you come in with will be paper-based. So you can come in with the regulation, you can come in with your slide pack, you can come in with your exercise sheets as well. So this would help you find Article 39 quickly, and you can just answer that. Okay, I think we should move on to the next topic. Sorry. Okay, Adore, DLA Piper. I've not seen that one.
Yeah, it basically just breaks down the articles and recitals. So, you can literally go onto them. I have it as an app.
Okay.
As an app reference as well, but I don't know whether the devices are acceptable.
All right, I'll check that later.
Yeah, cool.
Okay. Right, so let's go to the next. So this risk assessment under the GDPR. Oh, we was the data mapping exercise and this exercise, please. I want you to try it after we finish this session. So by the time we meet on Monday, we'll look at that together. Okay?
Okay.
Cool. So let's do the next topic and then we'll take questions before we close. And of course, the next topic, and the real case discussion, this won't come in the exam, but it's just to give you an understanding of how data protection applies throughout the world. And that's why it's about the about US citizens and EU citizens and the privacy shield framework. The importance of this is when you are searching for a job, they ask you some real questions. What's happening out there in data protection? You can use this to flesh your responses in an interview situation. That's the importance of this, not for the exam, but to give you some feel of what's happening out there with regards to data protection. Okay? Oh, we've actually come to the end of day 2. So do you have any questions? You've got homework. What do you know? So I'll take your questions. I didn't know we'd come to the end of day 2.
It's just a quick one. Are they the exercises we have within the pack? Are they answers as well?
There are answers, but I don't give the answers until we've done the exercises. So but I'll give you the, yeah, but I'll supply you with the answers. Yeah.
Okay, it's just good to understand, like, there's standard answers and the way that they answer them.
Oh, definitely. For those who have attended my courses before, they know I do that. So you have no fear. I'll definitely give it to you by Monday. And then I'll give you the others later on. I just haven't separated it, so there's no way to send you the ones we just did now. You will get all the answers, even the ones we haven't done, which is not the essence of doing it. Does that make sense?
Yep, got it. Thanks.
Roy.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's important we let the trainee know that the plan is we're gonna have a boot camp. So before the real exam, we're gonna do like a mock exam. So I'm hoping that we'll find a time where we'll all come do a kind of overview of everything that you talked about, like a summary. And on that day, when we have that boot camp, we'll be able to do a practice question like the real life, well, not the real life, but kind of mock of it. Then that would help with the confidence to go into the exam. So that's what we're going to do anyway. We've done this before when we had the 27,001, and it kind of really worked for the student, and the success rate was 100%, and that's the plan that I have for this as well. So at some point, probably on Monday, we're gonna have a kind of consensus to decide on number one, the day that we want to have the boot camp, and also the exam as well. I was having a chat with Roy earlier on today, and he did mention that to book the exam will need at least minimum of 4 days. What it means that we have to pay for it well in advance. You know what I mean? So just hold that thought, okay? That's the plan. The boot camp, then the exam. All right. But it's going to be democratic. On Monday, we're going to decide the date and the date for the exam. Okay. I hope that helps. So no fear, so the questions go and do is going to produce all the answers. But again, you're going to sit in class and trash it out. so that we don't have to cram. You can't cram this thing. You just have to understand it and apply it. When the questions are being asked. But trust me, everybody's gonna pass, and we're all gonna be DPOs. All right, go on, Roy.
Okay. No, I think that's it. I'm just waiting for questions. What about 150 objective questions? So you're looking at the risk assessment question and the homework, please.
So, Roy, is it the risk assessment? How do you call it? The risk assessment exercise.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Okay.
The risk assessment exercise and the homework.
Okay. Is that homework 1?
Yes, homework 1.
Okay.
Look at it on the board.
Yeah,
Just after risk assessment, you have homework 1, disclosure of personal data. Okay.
Okay.
Dari, oh no, it's Felicia. I don't know about the 150 questions.
I think I know where it's coming from. I think there's another body, maybe the IAPP, that does 150 questions, objective questions.
Okay, so maybe they've supplied that one.
Yeah.
It's also good to the mock test we're going to do will be essay, similar to what you will do on the day of the exam for this one.
It's not multiple choice. It's not scenario based. Hey, Roy.
I think Roy is having a connection issue. I can see it's yeah, it's
Right.
back. It's back now.
Answer you are given. Some of them, they will place you in the position of a consultant or a DPO to say, what would you advise? How would you monitor? So you'll be doing the task of a DPO essentially. So they could give a scenario to say such and such has happened. What would you advise the business to do? Should they do a DPIA, or some data has been lost and this is the situation? What would you advise? So those are the kind of questions you can expect to see. The exercises we're doing so far are a very good reflection as well.
So do you advocate for us to do them together or independently?
I like for us to do it independently, and then we at each other's answers. The way we've designed it, try it on your own, we have a discussion, and then we do the mock session. So it will all build up, so that we try to do it independently and see how we think the answers up.
Right. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. I kind of like your question at all. If you feel the need that, where you want to body up with somebody and just talk through what you've learned. To be honest, they said 2 good heads are better than 1. If that will work for you, number of us on this call, we're about 12. It's called synergy. To be honest, I know everybody's busy, but if you can facilitate it, and you guys say, hey, you know what, got time tomorrow, let's look at this together. It works. It just bounce. You guys are all professionals anyway. You just bounce idea of each other. Hey, this is where we do it at work, and everything that Roy has been shouting about since morning just all stick into your head. You know what I mean? So if it works, if you think you've got our time, please, by all means, use every opportunity to learn and learn and learn and learn. You know what I mean? And yeah, so whatever works, just do it.
All right. Thank you. Cool.
Quick question. I know you guys mentioned the mock session of the boot camp. Will any of those sessions be run on the weekend, or would they all be done Monday to Friday?
It's gonna be, the plan is, sorry if I didn't make myself clear. It's gonna be on the weekend, and the plan is we're gonna all sit in class. It's not gonna be online. So you're gonna see Roy's face, if that would help. Yeah, so we're gonna all sit in class, and we should come back to you on the venue hopefully anytime soon. So we're gonna all sit.
And do we have a date for that in mind? It's just that I've got
Monday. I mean, if you guys want to discuss it now, it's up to you, to be honest. If you want to discuss date, we can talk about it now. Roy, are you training? Does training finish for tonight, or is there any other thing you want to? Roy? Okay. I mean, we can talk about the date for the boot camp and also the exam today, because we have Monday to Friday next week to close up this training. My thought is if we can at least have 2 weeks from the 4th of May, if we can have at least 2 weeks window for the boot camp and the exam. So what that means is the weekend after the 4th, we do the boot camp, and then we now do the exam, or we do the boot camp the second week after the 4th, maybe on the Saturday. On the Saturday, Saturday the 4th, we do the boot camp. Sorry, Saturday. Hang on a minute. Let me just start to put dates to this. These are suggestions, please. I'm not enforcing anything. I'm just suggesting. So so training finish on the 4th, which is Friday. So Saturday is the 5th. Okay. So if we say 2 weeks after the 5th, so we're looking at tentatively the 19th, to do the exam. I think I understand that Roy is going to be busy on the 12th. So again, these are suggestions. We might as well do the boot camp on the 19th and write the exam on the same day. It's going to be a long stretch hour. It's up to you. If you don't want it, that's fine. Or we take the boot camp on Saturday. I know some people might object to this. And do the exam on Sunday. It's if you let me know what works for you, then we can just start to work on that basis. Suggestions, we can talk about it now, and agree on a date, because the earlier we agree on a date, the better. Okay. So the floor is open to everybody. If you
hello.
Personally, I'm out of the country from the 11th to the 13th. Then that was booked a few months ago.
Okay, 11th to the 13th. Okay, yeah. So even Roy's not available on the 12th. I think it's training on the 12th and on the 13th, which is pre-booked. So that would be out of it, because it's going to be, he would have to be available for the boot camp and the exam as well.
Okay, Wale, where is the location for the boot camp?
So it's going to be somewhere in Chatham. I mean, I'm also open to suggestions as well, because I think earlier on Felicia was telling me about a place that we can use. But I mean, we normally use Kent, to be honest, in Chatham. So I've got our data center is there. and the owner of that data center is a very good friend of mine. And when we did the 27001 exam, we actually used that place, and and I believe that it's not, well, I don't know where you guys live. It's at one also, but it's commutable wherever you're coming from, you know. So yeah, Chatham location.
Mm. And how long is the boot camp? Because I'm seeing boot camp and exam on the same day, but is that going to be a 6-hour day, or is it going to be?
So if we want to do the boot camp and exam the same day, so we can leave. So Roy says exam is 3 hours. Okay.
Yeah.
So we might want to do a boot camp, and I mean, if we spend good 2 to 3 hours, we will cover a lot. Okay, we will cover a lot. We would have, test and tried and and maybe get maybe another 40 minutes break in between, and write the exam there and there, the same day. Let's say 3 hours slot for boot camp. Roy, if you're there, please, so that I'm not speaking too much for you, then after the boot camp, maybe we take a rest for 40 minutes or an hour, then we do the exam afterwards, immediately. I mean, the same day, if that works.